You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Hristodoulou.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Hristodoulou, and today, as we do at the end of every week, we are going through our power rankings and recapping this past weekend's divisional round of the playoffs, going through my thoughts and what I saw from this week's games, and putting everyone that remains in the playoffs into an order. So let's get ready to dive right into it. But before we do, I have a question of the day for you all. With the San Francisco 49ers now sitting in the NFC Championship, just one game away from the Super Bowl, should they be considering trading away Trey Lance with how much success they've had with Brock Purdy? I know that this game this past weekend was definitely not his strongest. I would say it was shaky at some moments. He looked a little bit better in the second half once he kind of settled down and figured some things out, and the 49ers got the ball rolling a little bit there. But overall, Purdy has been an awesome asset to this team. He has steered the ship with confidence for someone that I don't think anyone ever expected to even see take a snap in the NFL, let alone find himself in the NFC Championship game with a shot at the Super Bowl in his very first year as a football player in the NFL. So I would love to hear your opinions on this one because I'm really curious what everyone has to think. If I was to give my personal opinion at this point, take what you can get for Trey Lance. Stick with Brock Purdy. You don't get to the NFC Championship by mistake, and obviously there's a lot of talent around this entire team, but Brock Purdy has been able to utilize his skill and get the most out of this team. They've they've scored 33 points in 6 of the last 8 games that they've played with Purdy under center, or more. Around that range. I believe they averaged 35 going into last night's game, probably dropped down a little bit closer to 30 because of the score that they had at only 19 points, but this offense has been efficient. He's done a good job protecting the football. They're not really turning it over as well. I think that at this point, with just kind of how the Trey Lance experiment has gone with him sitting out the first year and now he's missed another year due to injury, he hasn't really played meaningful football in like 3 years, at least a season's worth at that point. He's only had a couple of games here and there. You've got to consider at this point, Brock Purdy might be the guy for the future, but I would like to hear what you all think in the comment section down below, so let me know. But let's dive right in. We'll work through these power rankings. As you can see here, looking at the board right now, I have 32 through 10 already listed. For those of you that maybe have not seen this before, we talked pretty much 16 through 10 and why they are where they are last weekend, so if you want to check out last week's video, you can get a good idea as to what's going on there. But for those of you that are just listening on any podcasting platforms, the order goes as follows. The Bears at 32, the Colts are at 31, Texans are at 30, Cardinals at 29, the Raiders at 28, the Broncos at 27, Rams at 26, the Jets at 25, the Titans are at 24, Falcons at 23, Saints at 22, Browns at 21, Panthers at 20, Commanders at 19, Patriots at 18, Packers at 17, the Buccaneers at 16, the Seahawks at 15, the Steelers sit at 14, the Dolphins at 13, the Lions at 12, Ravens at 11, and then the Vikings settle in at 10. The rest are to be revealed as we go through here, but that's how everything looks so far. Let's start diving in. We'll wrap up 16 through 9 here, that third, fourth of the league, with none other than the New York Giants. Now, I dropped them pretty significantly after this week's game. Listen, they just looked completely outmatched going up against the Eagles from start to finish in that game. It's clear that there is a skill gap between them and the better teams of the NFC, and a lot of people are saying, well, what does this say about the Minnesota Vikings? I think it speaks a lot about their defense obviously being an issue. It's not that I don't think the Vikings have an offense to compete. It's just their defense has been a problem for the last 3 years. Honestly, as long as I've been doing a podcast, I feel like I have consistently said the same issue, and I've had Viking fans yell at me telling me, oh, it's fixed this year, and going on year 3 now has not been resolved. So that is definitely what they have to work on. But the Giants, they need to get more talent around Daniel Jones if they're really going to buy in on him, because it sounds like that's what they're going to do. They should definitely focus on keeping Saquon Barkley. They got to work on that O-line a little bit more, but the skill position needs to be addressed in terms of the wide receivers and getting yourself a legitimate tight end, a la once you had Evan Engram, who seems to be pretty successful over there in Jacksonville now. You need to find legitimate guys. I know that the Kenny Golladay experiment has gone completely south. You've dealt with injuries around the wide receiver position as well. So you need some guys to step up, but the Giants should definitely consider trying to find a legit guy to add to that wide receiver room. And the defensive side of the ball could definitely use some work as well. They were just letting the Eagles run all over them, and it sounds like there might be a potential that Leonard Williams is gone. He has like $20 million owed to him in cap space for next season, so that's going to be an issue. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, but hats off to the Giants for where they land to finish off the season, because this is a spot where I don't think anyone expected the Giants to be, myself included, and they do deserve the utmost respect for making it to the place that they did, because the fact that they even made it to the divisional round, I thought they'd be lucky to win maybe 7 games at most this year, and they managed to get to the second round of the playoffs. So hats off to them. Major respect their way for getting to where they did. Talk about a team that has been greater than the sum of their parts, and just like an absolute coaching clinic from Brian Daboll. The next 2 teams we're looking at number 8, I have the Chargers, and then the Bills at number 7. So the Chargers actually moved up a spot because of how badly of a beating the Giants got this past week. They were at number 9 last week. I decided to slip them up and drop the Giants just a little bit lower because of, obviously, while I'm not going to sit here and say that I think the Chargers could have beaten the Eagles, I think that the Chargers more than likely put up a better fight. Overall, I think they have a more talented roster than the Giants do right now. Coaching is obviously something where I'd probably give the edge to the Giants, but overall, I do think I buy into the Chargers just a little bit more after seeing what happened to the Chargers, where at least the Chargers blow the game, and you could chalk that up to just poor coaching, but I mean, they put themselves in a position to win that game, and it just kind of, again, coaching really led to that loss there, and some really bad decision making, but overall, the roster over there, I like a lot more than the Giants, so I figured I could slide them up at number 8 and be okay with it. And then the Bills at number 7, talk about a collapse. I picked the Bengals to beat the Bills, and while I was surprised at the 27-10 end result, I was not surprised in the Bills struggling the way they did. It seems like something happened the back half of the season with the Buffalo Bills, and I think it extends beyond the Damar Hamlin thing. It really is just between maybe that and the stress of it kind of knocking you a little bit off for a while, but also just the recklessness with the ball, the defense not being quite as good as it might have looked on paper. A lot of the nerds like to tout the stats, and no offense to the nerds, I am a nerd myself, but sometimes it's more than just the numbers. And I've watched this Bills team, especially being from the Northeast. I get to see a lot of Bills action all the time, and something felt off. The offense was not really clicking, and the defense, after losing Von Miller, just completely lost any real threat of a pass rush, and that ultimately kind of spelled doom for this team. With Von Miller, that defense is a completely different unit because he's a game changer, and he was really helping out the other young guys that are surrounded him, Greg Rousseau being one who I think really benefited from Von Miller being on the opposite side of him. But once you lost that X factor, and again, injuries as well in the secondary, the defense falls apart. The offense just kind of felt like it was Josh Allen or nothing, and things were not going well. It's tough, but the Bills are further from us, and I feel like I've heard a lot of people say this in the last handful of hours since their game, but the Bills are further from a Super Bowl this year than they were last year, and that's definitely saying something. So we'll see. I expect the Bills to regroup. I think they still have a great coaching staff. They have a lot of great players. I think Josh Allen is an excellent player. Losing Brian Daboll and not having him in his ear anymore, I definitely think maybe forced him to take a step back this year because he didn't have someone like Daboll to kind of help him in certain situations and be that guy that's in his ear to tell him, look for this or look for that, or, try to be a little more conservative here and not as aggressive there. And it's clear how much of an effect Daboll has because, again, look at what he did with the Giants and with Daniel Jones. I definitely think the common denominator between those two teams is Brian Daboll and the success and the step back, I guess you could say, of both these quarterbacks. The next two teams, we're looking at the Cowboys at number 6 and then the Jaguars at number 5. So the Cowboys, Ethan, how on earth can you have the Cowboys below the Jaguars? Well, listen, I'll tell you this. When I'm watching this 49ers and Cowboys game, I'm formulating how I want to put together my power rankings here. And I was ready to put the Cowboys at 5. And then the last play of that game happened. And this isn't the deciding factor, but it was something that really swayed me. I don't know what on earth that final play was. I don't know how Jerry Jones can come out and sit here and say that Mike McCarthy's job is completely safe and no one should be worrying about him being gone after seeing that. And that is your last gasp before, you get put down in the fight. I don't know what that was. I thought the play that the Indianapolis Colts ran a handful of years back against the Patriots was bad. That was done on purpose. At least the Colts had an excuse. That wasn't supposed to be run. You're lining up Zeke, making him ineligible as your center. So he gets absolutely pancaked, as you would expect him to, against a defensive lineman, or what was it, a linebacker? I don't even remember who it was that pancaked him, but he got completely rolled over. Like, what did you expect to come from that play? I understand the idea is this is going to be some lateral thing, but just run a regular, like, shotgun formation and work with it from there. I would love to know and hear from Mike McCarthy what the actual, like, draw up of that plan is. Like, what is the breakdown and the expectation that you think you're going to get? Because they even called a timeout to think over that play call and then did it again. So, like, I don't know. I am way off on the Cowboys right now. They're still a super talented roster, but they're undisciplined. Penalties were an issue for them, and coaching is just... Mike McCarthy sucks at clock management, and decision-making at times is awful. Not to mention, Dak Prescott did not have a great game. Losing Tony Pollard definitely hurt them, and I think that was a really big factor as well, but I don't know. The Cowboys, I'm fine with them at 6 for now. Maybe you could argue they should be higher, but I think at this point, I like Doug Peterson in the direction the Jaguars are trending in right now more than I like what I've seen from the Cowboys these last couple of weeks. And the Jaguars at number 5, I mean, I cannot praise them enough for being in that fight. Clearly outmatched and lacking some talent that the Chiefs clearly do have. You have one of the best head coaches, the best quarterback in the league. You have a litany of talent. While you don't have like the premier number 1 wide receiver, you have Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, McCole Hardman, and then Isaiah Pacheco he should be rookie of the year for the offense at minimum, because he has been phenomenal for the Chiefs. It's been unbelievable watching him run. Nobody, and maybe that's an exaggeration, but he runs harder than the majority of running backs in the NFL right now. There is nobody I can look at when I see him lining up to get a ball. Do I think he's definitely going to get this first down, or he's about to go for like 4, 5, 6 yards at minimum, because he just runs so fast and so aggressively. But enough with the praising on the Chiefs. My point on the Jaguars is for them to have been, for them to have been in that fight the way they were, for Trevor Lawrence to look as good as he did, this is a team that may be a little bit high, but based off what they've done this year, deserves all the credit in the world. They were in it to the very end with the Kansas City Chiefs going down by just one possession. Do I think they could beat the Bills had they played the Bills this week? Honestly, the way the Bills looked, probably. Do I think they could beat the Bengals? Not so sure about that, but I do think that right now where they stand, they are definitely within that like top 5 to 6 teams within the AFC East. You have the quarterback, you have the coach, you've got a lot of skilled talent. You need to find like another true wide receiver 1 for this team. I really like Christian Kirk, don't get me wrong, but there's just a thing or two that we're missing from the Jaguars team to really put them over the edge. And I think if you can find that for the offense, and on top of that, maybe just get another star on the defensive side of the ball, you really have something brewing over there in Jacksonville. And I cannot gush enough about this team, because you went from the absolute worst to the divisional round, and you were a possession away from potentially pushing this game into overtime, or maybe even stealing a victory had you gone for 2 and made it. So hats off to the Jaguars for where they end up. They deserve all the credit in the world. The next 2 teams at number 4, I have the Chiefs. And then at number 3, I have the 49ers. So you might be thinking, wow, the Chiefs at 4 and the 49ers at 3. Who's sitting at 1 and 2? Obviously, there's only 2 teams left, but how do I have them ordered here? Well, the Chiefs, I'm a little bit concerned now. I just, heaped a ton of praise on them, and I was talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars a second ago, but I fell into a Chiefs, like love fest for a second there, because I do really like how good this team is built, but the injury to Patrick Mahomes is a little bit concerning. I don't know how he's going to finish that game next week. He's apparently feeling a little bit better than everyone would have expected him to. I don't know if that's just them saying that. The only real concern I have with them is that injury. Other than that, this defense has stepped up and looked really good. And like everywhere, from the defensive front to the linebackers to the secondary, everything has looked really good over there in Kansas City. You couple that with the offense. As I was saying, you have a litany of really good wide receivers, a fantastic duo at running back. You have the best tight end in football right now in Travis Kelce. I mean, where can you go wrong with this Chiefs team? You have a phenomenal offensive line that has been rebuilt to be a contenders offensive line. I mean, what is not to love other than the fact that Patrick Mahomes is probably going to try and play this game on a high ankle sprain, and I think that might hold the Chiefs back a little bit. And then the 49ers at number 3. I think we finally saw the cracks in the armor of this 49ers team. And while my question of the day at the beginning of this was, do you think that the 49ers should consider moving on from from Trey Lance and sticking with Brock Purdy? Listen, I've been really high on Purdy the last few weeks. I was a little skeptical when he first came in. I was like, and I said it, I need to see the proof, and he has more than done enough to make me a believer. But he finally goes against a real top-end defense, and there was clear struggles. You have an Eagles team coming up next week that has arguably a defense that is just as good and if not better than what the Dallas Cowboys have been putting out this year. And I'm a little bit concerned for how things are going to go for San Francisco. I know that they just had a really easy game against the Giants, but the Eagles they're on a level, and they're on a level that I don't think a lot of teams have been on in quite some time on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. I think the 49ers are very close, but I think the advantage does go to Philly just because of the fact that they have a far more stable quarterback at this point. Jalen Hurts has gotten to a level now where he is one of those top dogs in the NFL at the quarterback position, and that's kind of where I give the edge here and why I have the 49ers at 3. Everything else about San Francisco, again, I cannot gush about them enough. This is a great unit. They have so many great players on the defensive side of the ball, the offensive side of the ball. Hauafunga has been, talk about, you go from last year with the dropped interception and then from Tart and how do you fortify your secondary? And then you bring a guy like him in, and he has just been an absolute stud. And they're not bringing, but he gets elevated to the position that he's in now, and he has been an absolute stud and arguably one of the better blitzing secondary players, I guess you could say, because I don't want to limit to what he does. I feel like he's all over the field sometimes, but I mean, there's just so much to like on the defensive side. You couple that with Nick Bosa and the rest of the D line there. There's just so much to love about that defense and how awesome they are. And then the skill talent, again, we're at the point now where when I look at this championship Sunday, we have the absolute 4 best teams that are about to play each other, and I could not have asked for anyone else. This is exactly what I wanted the championship Sunday to look like, and I'm very happy that the teams looked as good as they did and were able to fight the way they did to get to this spot, because I have no doubts that this championship Sunday is going to be an absolute dogfight between all 4 of these teams. But the 49ers, my only knock against them is just, how does Brock Purdy hold up as the pressure gets heavier and heavier? That's the only concern I have with them right now. I think they are one of the best in the league, and I hope you don't think I'm knocking them for having them at number 3, but I just think that the 2 teams in front of them have a better quarterback situation, and that's kind of what slips them into a spot where they're not in the top 2 or at the very top of the NFL. And then for my teams at 2-1, I'll reveal them at the same time. We're looking at the Eagles at number 2 and then the Cincinnati Bengals at number 1. This was a hard one for me to kind of decide on because I'm very high on both of these teams. And at this point, this is potentially going to be my Super Bowl picks. I still haven't sat down and kind of looked at everything yet. I'm going to rewatch the games again. I already watched them once. I'm going to rewatch them again just to kind of get a real good feel of what was going on. But at this point, the Eagles really feel like the class of the NFC, and the Bengals are world beaters, and they've beaten the Chiefs with Joe Burrow under center 3 straight times now. And I know the past is in the past, but this is one of those runs where it just kind of feels like it's in the Bengals' hands. And my only real edge for why I have the Bengals ahead of the Philadelphia Eagles right now is because I really want to see the Eagles get tested this week. You got to absolutely dog walk a division rival and a team that was clearly lesser than what you are. And that concerns me just a little bit. I know that people were worried about Jalen Hurts' health going into this game. I was not really too worried about it. You got the 2 weeks off, and he looked pretty solid in that game that he played a couple of weeks ago before the season ended and wrapped up. My only real thing is just that the Cincinnati Bengals at this point, you got battle tested against a Ravens team that could have potentially beat you if Lamar Jackson was under center, but you got the job done. You had a tough divisional match. Then you go into Buffalo and you completely throttle a team that was everyone's Super Bowl favorites for like literally all year, honestly. They're battle tested. They're about to go up against a really good Chiefs team again. I think they can get the win, especially if Patrick Mahomes is going to be hobbled. I'm worried about how that's going to affect him and how that ends up playing out. I just have a slight edge because like roster to roster, I would maybe take like the Philadelphia Eagles defense just because their pass rush is insane, but the Bengals defense in the second half of games is just lights out for whatever reason. And then like I would maybe take the Bengals offense because for as awesome as the Eagles offense has been this year, there has been a couple of games here and there where I feel like, and it's been more recent for the Eagles, that they've just had a game that's not as pretty as you'd like them to be, whereas the Bengals have just been kind of rolling, and they had their ugliness kind of gotten out of the way in the early part of the season and have just rolled the back half of the season. And at this point now, the talent, I feel like I keep coming back to that. The skill talent of both of these teams is very comparable. You have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Quez Watkins, Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders, Boston Scott on the offensive side with obviously Jalen Hurts. But then you look at the Bengals and they have themselves Jamar Chase. Hayden Hurst is proving to be a really good tight end for this offense. I think a little bit of a surprise for some people there. Obviously, you have Tyler Boyd, you have T. Higgins, Samaje Perine, Joe Mixon. I mean, both of these teams are just loaded to the gills on offense with talent, but I would give a slight edge to the Bengals right now. I just feel like Joe Burrow has ice in his veins, and nothing is getting to these Bengals right now. They feel like world beaters to me. That's kind of how I described it to somebody the other day. But that is why I have the Bengals at 1 and the Eagles at 2. Let me know in the comment section down below what you agree and what you disagree with. I would love to hear your opinions, but those are my power rankings for this week. We've got just 2 more weeks of NFL play to go, 3 weeks if you want to count the Pro Bowl stuff, but season's wrapping up. We're pushing towards the end. Picks will be out on Thursday, so make sure you come back to check those out. Hit that like and subscribe button to help support the channel. But that's it for me. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.